Have you ever felt like taking a break or quitting something altogether? Maybe it's dance, maybe it's a different sport you do, or a challenge you set out for yourself, like going to the gym. Now, it's crazy to think that I haven't filmed a video for you in over 2 years, so I wanted to do something different today and explain to you what's been going on in my life, in my health, and give you 3 lessons that can help you. So it all started right before the pandemic. I came back to Colombia, I was gonna stay for 3 months, and then the pandemic hit. What was going on for me at the time is my hip pain came back. So about 10 years ago, in my early 20s, I had a hip surgery on my right hip, but I didn't rehab it well, so it's been weak for about 10 years now, and I wasn't able to get back into breaking. I used to be a break dancer, for some of you who don't know. And I started learning salsa instead. Fast forward to 2020, right before the pandemic, I was filming lots of YouTube videos for you. I was here in Medellin, going to lots of dance classes, but what happened is at the end of those classes, I'd be limping home. So I'd be associating a really negative experience with something that was normally positive for me, and I couldn't do it anymore. It was really painful, so I just stopped dancing and I stopped filming altogether. So lesson number 1, if you have a health issue, whether it be physical or mental, pour your life and your soul into figuring out a solution, because it doesn't magically get better, it only gets worse with time. So when I felt that pain again, I started a physical therapy journey that's now lasted 3 years. So what's going on with my hip? So basically, I had a hip impingement. And so what that means is the thigh bone, which is from your knee to your hip, connects in the hip socket. It's like a ball and socket joint. With a hip impingement, you either have a weird shape on your femur, the head of your femur, so it should be nice and spherical, but if there's extra bone here or extra bone on your pelvis, what's gonna happen is there's cartilage lining the joint and there's cartilage along on the head of your femur. And so if there's extra bone that starts bumping in and rubbing your cartilage, that starts to wear away and it really hurts. And there's this sort of like lining or ring around your hip socket called the labrum, and that basically helps keep the hip or the thigh bone in that hip socket. And so if you've got extra bone here and that starts bumping into your labrum, it really does a lot of damage, and eventually it causes a lot of pain. And the problem with me is it took me a really long time to identify that. And because it took me so long to identify it, basically there was a lot of cartilage damage done, there's a lot of smashing into that labrum, so the doctor told me I'd eventually get osteoarthritis. And on my visit home to Canada last year, it was so bad, I was actually getting shooting pains just to walk. Like I was walking through the airport with my backpack and I was just limping. It was so painful. So when my pain came back, I figured it was just from a weak hip because I never rehabbed well, but there was actually a lot more going on. So lesson 2, when you have chronic pain, you need to get images. Get x-rays, get MRIs, because if you don't have images, nobody really knows what's going on, including the doctors, including the surgeons. Anyone that tells you different is crazy and they're lying. So after I had my first surgery, I thought my impingement was gone because there was some extra bone here and they got rid of it, and so I thought my hip was just weak. But what was actually happening, and I'll throw out my x-ray here, is the normal head of a femur should be nice and spherical, like I said, but what had happened is a nice big osteophyte had grown back on one side and the other. And the theory here is this is my body creating a defense mechanism so that my joint would stop moving, because when it moves, it's causing damage. So one problem that was happening was I was doing all this physical therapy and moving my hip in ranges of motion that were actually causing more damage, because these osteophytes, these bone spurs, if you will, had come back. So I'd been in this place before, I went into problem solving mode, I took my x-rays and I started shopping them around to every surgeon, orthopedic surgeon I could find in Medellin, and one of the best clinics in the US called the Stedman Clinic. And after talking with, 5, 6 surgeons, it became really clear. They told me, your hip is fucked. There's nothing we can do about it. It's too far gone. There's too much cartilage damage. We can't do anything to make it better. Obviously, when I heard that news about my joint being so messed up that we're just gonna need to replace it, like I was totally crushed. This was the worst case scenario every doctor's ever told me about. And they were telling me that maybe you get a hip replacement in the last 10 years. And so, the depression set in, I felt really bad for a few days, but then I just knew I needed to focus on going forward. So I started talking to the doctors that actually do the hip replacements, and the news got better. So hip replacement technology is way better, the prosthetics are better. So for a young person like me, it could last about 20 years. For someone who doesn't use their hip a lot, it might last longer. So next step was just creating an action plan, and that was restarting physical therapy with a team that the surgeon had recommended to me, and basically avoiding some of those ranges of motion that were causing damage, and just seeing how much better can physical therapy make my situation before making that decision to get a hip replacement. Lesson 3, rehabbing and changing your body for the better is going to take a lot of time. If you've had an injury for years, if you've had chronic pain for years, you can't get rid of it in an instant. It's going to take time. Physiotherapy is going to be your new normal. Forget your weightlifting, like lifting heavy, going hard. Just focus on the physiotherapy and what you need to get better. And you need to change your timeline. It's not going to be 1 month, 2 months. You got to think 6 months, 1 year. These exercises are going to be your new normal and what you need to do every day. So to give you a little idea about what that's been like for me, I've been through 3 physio teams now. The first physio team wasn't aware that I had a mechanical issue, so we're using ranges of motion that were actually causing damage. That didn't work out. The second physio team, they had a bit of a different approach, but we were still unaware of the mechanical issue, and I just wasn't getting results after 2 or 3 months, so I knew something wasn't right and had to change. So when the surgeon recommended the third physio team, we started really focusing, well, 1, we had a better awareness of what was actually going on mechanically. Number 2, we were focusing on the strength of the hip, which really made a big difference. Basically, the strategy here is you're supposed to get a hip replacement when your quality of life is so low that you can't normally enjoy the things that you like to do. So as my strength increases, the pain is decreasing. So as long as I can keep seeing progress with physical therapy, I'm going to keep doing that until I hit a wall. And once I hit that wall, that will be the signal that I probably need to get the replacement. So lesson number 4, it's not going to be a clean, straight path to your goal. It's going to be ups and downs. It might be mostly downs, as it has been for me. But eventually, if you adjust, if you're not getting results in 2-3 months with someone, results take time, but you should be feeling some differences. Change your team, change your approach. It's up to you to go after your health and take care of your body. And so what I'm doing is basically, I've got my hips stronger with one of the physio teams, and now I've noticed this for a long time, but my alignment is really off. My posture is bad. So now I'm working with Pain Academy. I found Vinny on YouTube, on Instagram, and I signed up for his program. I'm working on realigning my body with rebalancing sequences. And I really think if I can focus on my alignment, that's going to help, because if you're misaligned with all your compensations and dysfunction, when you do an exercise, you're just going to reinforce the compensation. So I want to realign my body, rebalance it, so every time I do an exercise, I'm strengthening a good movement pattern. So that's what's been up with me. That's why I haven't been on YouTube for about 2 years now, but I'm back. I'm ready to film videos, so let me know what you want to learn. So quick recap, lesson number 1, if you have an injury, you need to pour your heart and soul into figuring out what the problem is, because it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse over time. Number 2, get images, get x-rays, get MRIs. X-rays can see bones, but MRIs can see tissues, muscles, ligaments, tendons, cartilage. You can't judge that perfectly off an x-ray. Lesson number 3, you have to change your timeline. If you're rehabbing a chronic injury or something that's been around a long time, you can't think 1 month, 2 months, 3 weeks. You're going to be doing these exercises for 6 months to a year. And lastly, you have to adjust as you go. It's not going to be a straight path to your destination, whether that's your health, dance, any goal you have in life. So take control, take your health into your own hands. Hopefully you're going to live for a lot more years. That's what you want your mentality to be. So take care of things now, because they're only going to go worse. So there's a little bit about my story. Hopefully that was interesting to you. I know this is a super common problem, hip impingements for active people, dancers, athletes, etc. So if you're having hip pain, consider that. Get an x-ray, get the image, because you need to address it as soon as possible before there's more damage done. That's it. Thanks, hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas for me on what you want to see in the next videos, throw those down in the comments. Hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about what's going on with me, and I will catch you in the next videos. Peace.